So let's go ahead and get into some of the basics for essay writing for our first essay here. General guidelines, we want to go ahead and stay in the present tense. So when we're writing our essays, we're going to go ahead and say Lexi says. Whenever we get to God Help the Child next, it's going to say Morrison writes, not Morrison wrote, right? Carney presents. The director is currently presenting right now. The only exception to this is if you include historical facts, true historical events that have occurred. So, for example, Barack Obama was president of the United States. That is a historical fact that is accurate. So, it's okay to speak in the past tense. Otherwise, whenever we're talking about literature or anything in this class in particular, we're going to be using present tense always. So general guidelines, third person. We want to stay in the third person throughout the entire essay. So we want to say she, he, they, them, people, society, etc. Absolutely no first or second person because it's informal. So first person would be I, me, my, mine. So we might say I think. We want to take that out. And no second person, which is us, we, our, you, your, and etc. Avoid speaking to me directly in the essay. So no you. It can get really awkward sometimes when you're like, hey, you, Professor Garavito. I'm like, oh, that's a little personal, right? Especially sometimes when we're talking about specific topics. It can just get a little weird, is all. So the way you can eliminate first person from your writing is very simple. You can start off by writing, I think that Lexi, blah, 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 right? And then you just go and delete the I think that. So I think that the director symbolizes Lexi's lack of control in her relationship with Jeff through peaches and ice cream. Perfect. If we remove that, now we have a really strong claim. The director symbolizes Lexi's lack of control in her relationship with Jeff through peaches and ice cream. That's beautiful. I love that. Okay, and then eliminating second person from our writing, we would just substitute those second person words, the us, we, our, you, and all of that with people, society, humanity, humankind, right? So pro tip, I would say use a thesaurus to help generate the language that you're looking for, and make sure to look up the definitions of the words that you don't know, because we might want to choose a fancy word, but let's just make sure we know what those words mean, because again, stuff can get a little weird. Alrighty, so words not to use in the essay at all, and this is for good. This is going to be for the entirety of my class. So we want to avoid using good, bad, positive, negative, things, stuff, happy, sad, any first or second person. Now, you might be wondering, like, why, Christine? Why can't I use these words? These are, first of all, they're a little basic, right? There's nothing wrong with being basic, but they are a little too basic in that they don't properly convey the tone that we want them to. So, for example, let me just tell you a quick story. My very first time teaching ever, I spilled a giant cup of coffee on my shirt, and I had no replacement. I was so embarrassed. I was like, wow, okay. So that was a bad experience for me. It was negative. I was a little sad, right? That was embarrassing. Now, let's say my grandfather passes away. That's also a bad experience. That's also negative. I am also very sad, right? Are the two comparable by any means? Absolutely not. So with the spilled coffee, I could have been embarrassed. I may have been distracted. That is disappointing, right? Those words wouldn't really necessarily fare for the death of a loved one. The death of a loved one would be, I'm devastated. I am at a loss, right? There's a larger vocabulary that we can use to better suit. So that's why I'm going to ask that we avoid these words, and I will circle them and cross them out each time because I want you to gain a better vocabulary. So just use a thesaurus to enhance your vocabulary, and you should be great. Thesaurus.com, honestly, is amazing. I have used that through all of my education, from community college to getting my bachelor's to my master's to even applying for full-time positions as a professor. So it's very useful. They also have a dictionary tab right next to it, so I would definitely recommend using it. Okay, so avoid asking questions anywhere in your essay in any formal writing at all. So instead of posing questions, I would like you to write strong claims. Your essay should be answering questions, not asking them, especially in your analysis. So for example, people might think, if we were to write in our essay, people might think, how can Lexi be depressed if she's eating ice cream? Instead, we can pose a stronger claim that kind of vocalizes the same sentiment. Carney uses the ice cream to juxtapose her internal conflict with bipolar disorder while she is with Jeff. right? So we got the idea of being depressed and the ice cream, right? Juxtapose is just a fancy word for like two opposing things that are coming together. So like almost like the yin and the yang, right? Two things that are opposite coming together. She's so sad eating her ice cream, and that is like, a juxtaposition for sure. So instead of posing a question, make a strong claim about it, and it'll turn your analysis around. Okay, so avoid using metaphors and casual phrases and euphemisms in your essay. So, for example, to like this euphemism of not crying over spilled milk or something, right? The implication is don't worry about things that have already happened and you can't change. It's not a big deal. So, for example, in our analysis, we might write something like, Lexi shouldn't cry over spilled milk and should just learn to live with her condition, right? So instead, a more academic approach would be write the implication in your own words and directly apply it to the character that you're analyzing. So instead of Lexi shouldn't cry over spilled milk and should just learn to live with her condition, we can write, while Lexi's moments of depression may be out of her control, it is important that she gives herself the space and time to confront her internal struggles so she can work through her depressive episodes. Alrighty. And sorry, let's just say English 101. I'm so sorry for that. But this is the color coding that I'm going to be using for throughout the semester. If we were in a traditional classroom, I would be having you highlight your essays and stuff, but we're not doing that because we're not in a classroom together. So I'm going to be following this color key accordingly just throughout so you can understand my codes. Alright. Quoting from the text. So first thing is we're going to want to provide context whenever we're providing evidence, right? So if we're paraphrasing or if we're quoting, you're going to want to provide context. So context is necessary information for the reader to understand what is going on before you set up the quote. Always introduce the quote with a signal phrase. A signal phrase introduces a quotation. So it'll say something like, Carney suggests, Lexi says, the narrator exclaims, Jeff asks. Then we're going to add quotation marks around the direct quote, and then we're going to add an in-text citation at the end of our quote. This is all mandated by MLA format, so I want to make sure that we got this down. So putting it all together, again, following this code here, the signal phrase, in-text citation, and quotations, we've got Lexi narrates, comma, I'm in the supermarket looking for some peaches, like a craving for peaches. And then we've got the in-text citation, take me as I am, whoever I am. So we've got signal phrase, direct quote, and then we have the in-text citation right here. So this is how we quote from a text if we're using direct quotes, right? But what if you want to paraphrase? Paraphrasing is basically the same thing as providing the quote, except you're just going to summarize it on your own. So the same thing, we have to provide context before we paraphrase. Then we begin the paraphrase by briefly summarizing the scene that you want to analyze, and then we add in the in-text citation. So instead of adding a direct quote like a crazy craving for peaches, we just summarize what happened. The viewers are introduced to Lexi's bipolar mania very early on in the episode when she describes an immense craving for peaches. And then we still have our in-text citation. So the only difference is when we quote directly, we have a signal phrase. Always, always, always. When we paraphrase, there is no signal phrase. Both must have an in-text citation. This is crucial for MLA format. This is, some professors are eager to just be like, oh, plagiarism, because you didn't. So I'm not one of those professors. I will thank you for plagiarism if you blatantly plagiarize online. But other than that, don't worry about it. If you have questions or concerns about citing, please just ask me, and I'm more than happy to explain and break it down for you again. So, yeah, that's basically the only difference. Direct quote is exact words, word for word, from the text or from the episode or whatever we're watching. And a paraphrase is just your own summary of the exact same thing, but both constitute pieces of evidence. Alrighty, thank you so much for watching. If you have any questions regarding this content, please send me a message.